Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. Today on the podcast, I chat with Eric G. Eric is the author of The Power of Personality. He is a life coach, and he created the Youtopia project. In that, he designed a personality test for people to go online, learn more about themselves, and about the other people that are in their lives. It's very interesting to me. This has always been a fascinating subject to me. I took the test. It was quick and easy. Very accurate, I will tell you. I'm a bear. But I encourage you to, after you listen to this conversation, go check out his book and go take the test online. I think you'll find it very interesting. Thanks for being here.
Hi, how's it going? Sorry, I'm
Good. How are
just getting
you?
my setup here.
Sure. So I am very laid back. I really just like having conversations with people. I do my own editing. You're probably way more professional at digital things than I am. So
Oh, don't assume that. I just go with the flow. So whatever you want to talk about, like
okay.
obviously I like personality types, and we can definitely talk
Yes.
about which one. You definitely seem more like an elephant to me than a bear. That's my
Well,
my impression, but I could be wrong.
you told me that. And so I went and looked at the elephant. I don't feel like I'm an elephant at all.
No?
I feel like the bear is like,
Oh, it's
that is
closer.
who, yeah, way closer to who I
Okay.
am. I didn't know if
Yeah.
the book came first or if your coaching program came first and you wrote the book after that, or how did all that come about?
Well, so when I was a kid, I was really interested in this because, well, when I was younger, I kind of felt a little different, not in a bad way, but just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I have different values, which I think values are really strong, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, we don't assume that people value different things. I think we assume like differences when it comes to like, oh, this person's more organized, I'm a little more
Right.
flexible. And so I was a little different. And so when I learned about MBTI, which is what I got started with, I was
Hmm.
really fascinated by it. And I read up on all these things. And then it wasn't until I started my own education company where I really
Oh,
started developing my own methodology because, we worked with about 1,000 kids a year. And so
wow.
I would have 1,000 kids with 1,000 pairs of parents. And then obviously I had about maybe 50 or 60 tutors working for me. And that
Oh,
interaction between all of them was really interesting because I could go like, okay, like we have to treat these kids differently because we're working with them in a one-on-one setting. It's not like you have a whole classroom. So there's no excuse
yeah.
for us to not individualize our teaching program. Um,
Right.
and a lot of my teachers had similar personalities. I can go into it later, but like there's a gatherer personality,
Hmm.
which makes so I split people up into four. This is getting really nerdy really fast, but I split
No, that's
people
good. I want you to tell me it all.
I split people into four different personality packs, and I call them
Yeah.
packs, obviously, because we have animal types.
Yeah.
And then within those four personality packs are four animals types.
Yeah.
So if you belong to the gatherer pack, then you're going to relate to gatherers or other gatherers really easily.
Yeah.
However, they will go about their core value or achieving that core value maybe a little differently than you. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, you're all going to value safety and security as your number one priority.
Hmm.
So you're a bear, and
Yeah.
bears do. That's their number one thing. They're all about keeping things safe and secure, and that's their number one goal.
Yeah.
So a lot of gatherers, of course, become teachers, and that's really cool, especially elementary school teachers,
Okay.
because the whole idea is like, I got to keep a safe classroom. I want it to be a safe space for the kids to learn and grow into what it means to be like an adult in society. They don't have to learn to be a
Yeah.
rocket scientist, but they do have to learn to treat others with respect and use the golden
Right.
rule. And so I had to teach my teachers though that not everybody is like that, and you're gonna have a lot of students that
Right.
aren't gatherers, and you're gonna have a lot of students bouncing off the walls, and like, and you can't tell them. You have to talk to them and treat them with respect, and not try to change them,
Right.
and that's where it came from. So sorry, that was a long rant, but
No,
basically
that's
I
good.
started that, and
Yeah.
I eventually shuttered my business just because I wanted to get into more of the creative writing aspect because kind of that was what I trained for in terms of like academically.
Yeah.
And I was writing screenplays because I'm here in LA. And I was part of a writers group, and we'd go to a bar after we'd write, and I obviously brought up the animal types, and people got really into it. And a friend of mine
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, like you should like write a book on this." And I was like, "No, no, no, I'm gonna keep writing my pilots on sex addicted rabbits and stuff." And she was like, "Okay, fine." And she put the ideas in one of the episodes for the TV show that she was writing on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, like, well, I guess if it's because the writers' room really liked it, they thought it was fun." And I was like, well, if it's
Yeah.
fun for them, then maybe I should do that. Maybe I should write a book on it. And so I
There you go.
did. Yeah, and that's one of the ways I pitched it to my agent, or pitched it to
Yeah.
find an agent and find a publisher, was like, oh, as featured on Apple
There you
TV's
go.
Mythic Quest, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so anyway, that's
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 awesome.
that's how
I
that was
do
like.
think it's fascinating. And what's funny to me is I've done the Enneagram.
Hmm.
I've done it 3 different times on 3 different websites, like different times, different seasons in my life. And every time I'm a 6. And I don't want to be a 6. Like I
Oh,
wished every time I wasn't a 6, because some of the ways they describe it, I sound like a big chicken, like I'm scared of everything. But really, it's a security thing. I
right.
am always the one looking out for danger and making sure. And so it cracks me up that I was the bear and it's the gatherer and it's the, one that's talking about safety and security.
Right.
That's
And
just
bears are
me, I
not scared.
guess.
Bears are not scared. And bears actually do get this like MO of like being easy to beat on, which is
Yeah,
funny because it's interesting because they actually can take a lot of punishment, physical or whatnot,
right.
emotional, whatever. But the interesting thing is if you mess with like let's say their kid, or
Yeah,
which is why I call it the bear. If you
yeah,
mess with someone that they love, then they can get actually almost over the top extreme in like the cruel aspect. They could
yeah.
just get vicious and violent
Oh gosh, I
because
hope I'm not like that.
well I'm sit talking in extremes, right?
You're
But
right.
I think of like the bear as like Superman, right? Superman can take a
Yeah,
lot of punishment, but of course he's going to fight for other people and to protect them.
yeah,
And I think like Forrest Gump would be another great example. Like they're
yeah.
very selfless and but they do care about security for their loved ones, and
Yeah,
they're
that's
not
true.
chicken at all.
Yeah.
They're just generally kind, and I think there's obviously a lot of strength in kindness that tends to get overlooked, right?
I like that description a lot better. It sounds a lot better. So you have helped lots and lots of people with your assessments and your coaching and stuff. Have you heard any success stories or any kind of story from anybody that just you remember that you're very proud of or that you were glad you're able to help?
Yeah, I think this might be giving away, but I think I tend to work with certain personalities better than others, mainly because of like if you like, so let's say the panda personality type, it's a bit of a minority personality type. It only makes about 2% of the population, and they
Oh,
tend to
wow.
be very neurotic and kind of like introspective. They're one of the shaman personality types, or
Hmm.
they're the shaman pack. And I myself am also in the shaman pack, so I can relate and identify, but I'm kind of a more outgoing, more outward kind of personality
Yeah.
within the shamans. And I think those students, when I get them, they feel really weird. They feel like aliens, basically. And I
Yeah.
think when working with those students and clients, like it really helps me like kind of like show like, look, you can be yourself, but also be like a very powerful version of yourself. So
Sure.
and maybe this is dating me, but like I love like I've had a student who's probably now like I think she's in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, who
Mhm.
texted me just the other day saying like, "Hey, like, I just want to let you know like I really remember my sister and I, because I helped both her and her sister. We talk about the
Yeah.
personality stuff all the time, and I just want to let you know that that was like really meaningful to me because it helped me like really become who I am, and this is where I'm at right now. And even though I'm working at this job, I also still haven't given up the poetry that I do, and that was something that I really felt like you helped me with. And so when I get
That's
stuff like that, that's
awesome.
that's what makes it worthwhile, right? Like,
Sure.
at the end of the day,
That's
teaching really isn't about the money, right? Like it's
right.
about,
No, it's
helping other
not.
people, right? So
Yeah. So you said you were teaching one-on-one. Are you doing that in a school or is that private teaching that you're doing, or how is that work? How does that work?
so I'm a life coach. I call it life writing
Okay.
coach because a lot of people hire me to coach their kids in writing.
Yeah.
And it started for, I've been doing it for 20 years, and
Yeah.
I developed a system just purely based on experience and practical
Yeah.
application where I realized if you want to help someone learn how to write, you need to help them find their voice. Like that's number one, what you need to do.
Absolutely.
I don't work on grammar. I don't work on sentence structure. I find like that kind of stuff is kind of inane. But working on finding who they are and how the best way to express themselves
Yeah.
um, is what writing is about. And I find that you can't help someone find their voice if they don't know who they are. So that's where the life coaching comes in.
That's awesome. And I will say from experience that is 100% accurate because I spent 6 months with a life coach. She was a writing coach, but she
Mm.
was a life coach and we didn't work on writing at all. She helped me with things that were going to help me with my writing. And when I got done, I wanted to do a podcast. I didn't even want to write, but I would not, I don't know that I would have done the podcast had I not gone through that, because she did help me find my voice. And there was a lot of other things I went through too, but that was a big chunk of time that really worked on. So I 100% agree with what you just said. How do you think that understanding people's personality types can help us when we're working with people in our job or, going to school or whatever it is? How do you think it helps us?
I think communication is a big thing. Like knowing what people value in themselves helps you bond and connect with them better. Like I think I gave them the example of like teachers, right? Like a lot of like every kindergarten teacher knows that half the class is going to sit there listening politely to them as they tell them the rules, and about a third of the class is going to be running around grabbing things and throwing things and not
Right.
misbehaving. And I put that in
Right.
quotes. And those are like I call that the hunter pack.
Hmm.
And hunters make up about a third of the population, gatherers make up about half the population. So you put that together, that's about 85%, right? That
Yeah.
you're going to find are hunters and gatherers. And whereas gatherers seek safety and security, hunters seek excitement and fun. And
Yeah.
like they just love like that visceral sensation of being a little scared, right? And I think for gatherer, they're gonna be like, why would I want to be scared ever? Like I want to feel safe. Like
Right.
why do I want to go on this roller coaster throwing me around, feeling like I'm going to die? And so it's sometimes when you get gatherer teachers, their natural instinct to tell a hunter is to say like, oh, be careful. So whatever you do,
Yeah.
be careful. And if you tell a hunter that, you're basically telling them that the thing that they value in themselves, which is their risk taking and the ability to really try things, is not valued, right? If you tell them to be
Hmm.
careful. But if you tell them
Yeah.
to concentrate or to focus, it has a totally different result. They'll just be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, like you're telling me I can take this risk, but when I do, like if I do juggle chainsaws, it's okay. But when I'm
Right.
doing it, I better be careful, or not be careful, but better be focused on catching the chainsaw. And
Yeah.
I think in general, like life and work is a lot like that, where you just find what people's personality type is, then you can kind of figure out what their value is and communicate them
Sure.
with them that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Working with people can be tricky sometimes when we don't understand their personalities. So I love this kind of stuff. It's very fascinating to me. So you're
Yeah.
coaching? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no. I was just saying, yeah, just like, yeah, it's
It is.
exciting.
It's very cool. I love doing those kind of tests. And the test was very simple. I'm going to make sure I tell people to get on there and do it. It did not take that long, and it's very, it's interesting, and I think it's fun. So I'm going to make sure I point that out to people when I post for the interview. But
Yeah, I
so
always put, can I throw a disclaimer in there really quickly?
please,
Because I wrote the
please,
book. So I wrote my book in a way to teach people to become the test. I do encourage everyone to take the test
yes,
online first and kind of dip your toe in the water. But
yes,
also, if you read the portrait and it doesn't totally fit, then you might want to read another portrait that's close to it.
yeah,
Or, buy the book, and the book will teach
yes,
you really go in depth in the methodology and has obviously like way more in depth in terms of the portraits and descriptions of the
yeah,
animals, and it really breaks down how the methodology works, whether you're this or this. I asked you before, you might have been an elephant. Elephants and bears are like the closest to each other.
yeah,
So it's not like far-fetched to like you have the same
right,
energy as an elephant, which is warm and
yeah.
friendly and talkative. So
I like how you have, like you said, you have the four groups and then there's four different ones because just because two people have a little bit of the same personality, they could also have very different things in their personality. I love that you did it that way because that's accurate. That's very true. So a little bit of the elephant was me, but mostly I was a bear.
yeah, and it is the difference between an elephant and a bear is they both prioritize family. Of the gatherers, they prioritize family like number one. Elephants are always trying to bring people into their family, like herd them, like, oh, like they're the mom or dad who's like, hey, telling their kids, like, hey, invite your friends over for dinner,
Yeah.
let's just have them over. And a bear is focused more on protecting the family that they have. So
Yeah.
that would be a big difference.
Yeah. That's definitely me. It's so funny. I'm going to get my kids to do this. So your coaching program, you've had some pretty big companies that have used your coaching program. So do you do that a lot? Do you advertise to companies and places and go in and work with employees and stuff?
That was actually based on more of a personal relationship I
Oh,
had.
okay.
And this person worked as a project, I gotta get this right. No, product manager at
Yeah.
Hulu and then at Disney, or I think it
Oh,
was the
okay.
other way around. And so
Yeah.
I helped them with their teams. And with software engineers, I don't want to paint a wide brush, but with they're not always the best working with people. Like that's not their
Yeah.
focus. And especially some of the personality types that become software engineers, interpersonal and intrapersonal skills are not at the forefront of their
Right.
priority system. So it was great because then I could teach the managers like, hey, like, this is this person type, personality type. This is this person's personality type. You can't get mad at them. It's just, that's
Right.
just how the way they are. Like, but you should be thankful that they're very objective and slightly insensitive because they got to be doing a lot of things where they're not dealing with people and they're calculating these very objective figures, or not
Right.
calculating, but programming and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah, I would think this would be really good for companies, for teams, because like I said, working with people is tricky. We're all different. And so this is probably a really good thing for different companies. Do you get a lot of feedback from people? I know you said that girl texted you after working with her, a while ago, but do you get a lot of feedback from people after reading the book? And um, is
Yeah.
anybody ever shocked or disagree with their results or anything?
Oh,
Share
yes,
their
a lot.
tests?
That's number one. Or people, because it's very similar to MBTI and it's a bit evolved from
Yeah.
that, right? So people will be like, oh, I'm this MBTI type. I'm like, no, you're not. You're this one. Like, you're this animal, right? And like,
Yeah.
why are you telling me? How are you telling me what I am when I am
Right.
me? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
it's actually a lot easier for me than for you because, like, you know all this information about yourself.
Right.
And oftentimes we have this much information, we can rationalize anything, right?
Sure.
Like someone will hear a hunter like description and be, oh, hunters are natural athletes. And you know what? I made the basketball team. I was sitting on the bench, but I was like the 12th man on my JV high school team. So I was athletic. I'm like, okay, like I'm talking about like Michael Jordan, like
Right.
it's very different. So we can rationalize. So I tend to focus on negative things
That's
because
funny.
no one is going to take or claim the negative trait of another personality type. They'll only
Right.
claim the negative traits of
Right.
their own because at least that they'll accept. They'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I am a little rigid. I'm sorry. Like, or I'm a little like, maybe I'm a little boring sometimes. They'll be okay with that, but they won't take the negative. They won't be like, oh yeah, I'm like reckless. They won't, that
Right.
person will not say that because they know that that's not them.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know how it works if we understand people that we work with and we know their personality types, but how can we use it to our advantage? Like if I'm going into a job and I'm working with all these people and I know my personality, how can I use that to my advantage working with others?
I think number one, it's good to know your value first, right? So that you can go like,
Right.
okay, this is what I want, and not to break off of that, right? Like you're not trying to change who you are to adjust to other people. You still
Yeah.
have that solid anchor of like, I mean, for a bear, you're like, look, we are all going to get along, with working in a team. Like I don't want anyone like calling anyone out and like having all this like,
Right.
these morale problems. We're all going to like set like follow specific rules to treat each one other with everyone with respect, right?
Right.
But when it comes to like reaching the objective, sometimes it helps to know, okay, this personality type tends to like this better, values this better. So maybe I'll put them in this position so they can help with this versus
Yeah.
this. Like I think I like to use a lot of pop culture, especially in the book, because it can get kind of a
Yeah.
wonky subject. So there's
Right.
so many different allusions to random pop culture. And one that I really liked was in the movie The Avengers,
Uh-huh.
because there's like Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, and they're actually clearly they're the same personality pack. They're
Right.
called Smiths, and that's why they get along so well. I think there's a great line where Tony Stark, like, or Bruce Banner is like saying some really technical jargon, and then Tony Stark's like, "Oh, finally someone who speaks English," And it's like, yeah, because they understand each other because they
Yeah.
speak together, right? But they're very different as well because they're not the same animal type. And there's a moment where Tony Stark's trying to convince Bruce Banner like to help him do something, and which Bruce Banner would be better than Tony Stark at, and Banner's like, oh, so you want me to help you do this? And then Tony Stark's like, no, I'm going to help you do this because you're
Yeah.
better at it than I am. So I think knowing people's strengths helps us put them in better positions to succeed and maybe helps
Sure.
us also defer a little bit, right? Like things
Yeah.
where even though we're in charge, maybe we're not so great at this particular task and maybe this person's better, so they should probably do it.
That's good. Do you think people have misconceptions about doing these tests? Like, what do you think they are? Or what do you think some are?
I think there are a lot. I think the positive, like the focus on skills and like what I'm naturally good at, that can be a bit of a misconception. I don't think anyone is naturally good at anything. I mean, unless you're Mozart or something like that. I
Right.
think generally we are naturally inclined to like certain things. And the
Yeah.
more we like something, then the more we'll do it. And,
Mhm.
because it's fun. And the
Yeah.
more we do anything, then we're going to get better at it. So I think
Yeah.
that's a natural conception because I think sometimes when people take these tests, they maybe feel like a little, like I don't want to say a hole inside themselves, but they feel like they need some kind of confirmation.
Yeah.
And the only problem with that is like, they want to read a test and say, oh, I'm naturally gifted at this, when it might not necessarily be true because they haven't put in the work. And I still
Sure.
believe no matter what your personality type is, you're not destined for anything. You're
Yeah.
destined to like you have a destined path, but you still got to walk down that path and put in the work.
Yeah. So who do you think, who is the perfect candidate for reading your book or taking your test or figuring out what their personality type is?
Oof. I hate to say everybody because they say
Right.
if your audience is everyone, then your audience is no one.
Right.
So if I had to pinpoint anyone, I would definitely say someone who maybe feels a little different than some of the values that they're being told they should follow.
Yeah.
Um, Also, I will say this is a very different subset, but parents, it's great.
Yeah.
Like when I taught my teachers this, it was so
Mhm.
funny because obviously I was trying to train them to work with their students, but those that had kids already were the ones who like got it right away. They're just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, no wonder why I love all my children equally, but man, my son really does piss me off sometimes. Or my
Right.
daughter, like I just and then my other kid, like they're perfect." And it's like,
Right.
well, it's not that this one's perfect and this one's not. It's just that probably the one that you think is perfect is probably just similar to you. So you guys like
Exactly.
bond with the other one, you're just gonna have to like just deal with it because unless you want them to change, which is really unhealthy, you can't force them to change. You want them to be the
Right.
best version of themselves. I always
Yeah.
say puppies don't grow into cats, they grow into dogs. And so I feel like the same way with the animal types. Like you're not going to
Yeah.
grow into another animal type unless someone is constantly pushing you that way. And you're never going to be the best version of yourself if you do that.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Is there
Yeah.
anything I haven't asked you about that you want to
I
tell me
mean,
about?
I talk about anything. So,
Yeah.
I don't really think about anything that I need to say aside from, buy my book if you're really interested in this topic. You can
I
find
will
it
be
anywhere.
promoting your book, and I'm going to get your book because I do want to read it. I just, like I said, I think this is all fascinating, and there's a lot to learn from it. Do you want to tell me about your book? I mean, what are people going to find in it that is beyond the test?
It's basically just goes through the methodology. It's like the whole book. It will teach you how to be a test, essentially. And so it does like things like it will teach you like certain nuances to look for. One of the ways that I would find gather students, for example, and this is like some of that more higher level advanced stuff,
Yeah.
is like when you're really kind of like throwing stuff out there to get responses so that you can
Sure.
read. Because at the end of the day, the book teaches you how to read people. And so
Yeah.
as students, I used to try to figure out which ones were gatherers by just making fun of my mom. I would just crack a joke about my mom just randomly. And generally, if
Yeah.
you're working, especially with younger kids, um, the gather ones will look a little scared.
Yeah.
Not they'll look a little scared for me. They'll be like, "Ooh, I don't think you're supposed to be doing that. Ooh, you shouldn't be insulting your mom, right?" And the funny
Yeah.
thing is, I tell them my mom, which is true, my mom was a school principal. I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
my mom's a school principal. I always just make fun of her." Um, and
That's funny.
but then those that laugh with me and or have me may have like a little mischief in their eye. I'm like, okay, you're not a gatherer, and I can kind of
Right.
gauge what you are. So the book kind of does that. It kind of will tell you, oh,
Yeah.
it may look for these things, maybe not necessarily obviously the surface things first, but you got to go beyond the surface because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily we are all capable of doing things.
Right.
And what we do is not indicative of who we are. It's why we do it. That's what makes us who we are.
Yeah. Do you explain in the book? Okay, when you're teaching people how to read other people, do you explain how to handle other people? Like handle different personalities or different types?
Yeah, I do a little bit. It's not as prescriptive, obviously, because I had a word count that I was struggling with in
Right.
terms of like keeping it to like I couldn't make it 120,000. But there'll be a
Yeah.
follow-up book that'll be a little bit more prescriptive. But it does like it tells you what makes a person who they are and what they value, and this is how they're going to
Yeah.
come off. And also it tells how they're going to conflict with other personality types. And I think
Mm,
people ideally will be able to fill that space, right? Like if gatherers are going to conflict with hunters because the clear thing that's the typical Bert Ernie kind of conflict, even though
right.
gatherers hate that because Bert is kind of boring. But I mean, we know what that means. Like a Felix and
Yes.
Oscar.
Yeah.
Um, I think we understand that conflict and just how to
Yeah.
navigate that becomes a little bit easier when you read the book because you can see, oh, okay, and even deep down to the specifics. As I said, hunters and gatherers,
Sure.
but even within the specific subsets, right, with the different animals, they'll respond a little differently, right? And to be honest, like it tends to be a good coupling. Like just
Yeah.
on hunters and gatherers do tend to the most common marriage and
Hmm.
couple is a gatherer and a hunter combined. And you'd think it would be a gatherer and a gatherer because
Right.
gatherers make up half the population and family, and creating a family is very important to them. So you'd think a
Yeah.
gather would be the most common coupling, but no, it's a gatherer and hunter because I think at the end of
That's
the day,
funny.
we do we are drawn to things that are
Right.
different than we are. So,
This has
okay.
been wonderful. I so appreciate you talking to me.
I talk a lot, so
No,
sorry
I'm
if I talk
glad.
too much.
That's the best kind of guest to me when I don't have to drag information out of them. So I appreciate you talking a lot. This has been wonderful.
Oh, it's been a lot of
So
fun.
fun. And I don't know if your book is in my Amazon cart, but I have it on my list because I do want to read it. I want to know more about all of it. So
Yeah, let me know if the descriptions fit, and
I
especially
will.
with your kids, because that's generally what
Sure.
most parents are like. Oh, I want to figure out why I don't get along with them in this fashion.
I
That's
get
the number
along
one
with
thing.
all my kids. I get along. So my daughter and my husband are exactly alike. And so she did the
Okay.
Enneagram before he did.
She got a 3.
No, she was a 1. Well, her
Oh,
husband
okay.
was a 3. That was so funny.
Oh,
Their
okay.
best friend. So she was a 1, he was a 3, and then their best friends, he was a 1 and she was a 3, which is interesting because they're each couple is opposites, but the friendships are opposites also. And so I thought that was interesting. But my husband, when he was taking the test, I said, "You're going to be a 1 because our daughter's a 1." And they're exactly like, and I was right. He was a 1. So
Interesting. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, they could be in the exact same personality type, or they could just be in the same pack. But
Yes.
maybe they
Yeah.
achieve it in a different way. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
like you could start seeing the differences. You're like, oh, okay, she's maybe a
Sure.
little more aggressive than he is, or whatever, and then you start
Yeah.
getting, because it does make a huge difference. Like
It does. Yeah.
Einstein was a Smith, and he was super unaggressive, but then
Huh.
a killer whale is also a Smith, and it's probably one of the more aggressive types you can imagine. So,
Right. It's very interesting to me. I love all this. I love it. So, well, I thank you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
oh, thanks so much.
Alrighty. I'll be in touch.
Okay,
Okay.
bye.
Bye.